Welcome back, everyone. It is now time for our last panel discussion for the day, and I'm sure this will be as insightful as the ones you've experienced all through the day. The topic for this one is managing people through data-driven insights. In the modern age of the smooth digital takeover of our workplace processes, it is easier to let the data speak for HR processes as well. The people of an organization are the foundation of any business development. Recruitment, performance evaluation, hiring, promotion, compensation, job designs, and leadership are all easily trackable thanks to data-driven assessments. People analytics helps HR processes be more objective and accurate. It helps in fastening the people-related processes in any organization and have more precise outcomes. In this panel discussion, we will discuss how people analytics can help organizational challenges and create business impact, and how we can take data and propel our organizations over its efficiency. And with a great pleasure, I would like to invite our esteemed panelists for this session. First up, we have Jared Blunk, Talent Insights Strategy and Analytics Partner, Global Talent Acquisition at General Motors, United States. Jared originally started at General Motors as a sourcing specialist until leading the Talent Insights team at General Motors for the last 2 years, building partnerships internally, helping drive the organization's talent strategies with data-driven insights. Prior to General Motors, he worked the last 4 years in recruiting and HR roles, both for companies and as a consultant. Next, we have with us Foo Chek Wee, Head of Human Capital and Office Administration at the Straits Trading Company Limited, Singapore. Based in Singapore, Chek Wee serves as the human capital head for Straits Trading and conglomerate investment company with diversified operations and financial interests in resources, property, and hospitality. Previously, Chek Wee had served 10 years in large companies such as Visa Inc. and American Express as a country, regional, and international HR business partner. Also, he had 6 years of HR experience blitzscaling startups, including Zalora, Riot Games, and Oriente. For his contribution to the HR profession, Chek Wee was honored with the following accolades: Singapore's LinkedIn Power Profile in 2015 and 2016, one of the 4 winners across APAC to be awarded the coveted LinkedIn Conscious Business Award in 2015, Captain of HR Recognition by HRM Magazine in 2014, and winner of the Best HR Manager by HRM Awards in 2013. And next up, we have joining us Gaurava Sahi, Expert Associate Partner, Organization Practice at McKinsey Company, Malaysia. Gaurav is an Expert Associate Partner with McKinsey Company in Kuala Lumpur. As a leader in McKinsey's Asia Organization Practice, he leads the organization design and talent service lines for the region and serves clients on a variety of organization topics, including organization design and productivity, transformation, future of work-based talent strategy design, capability building, and leadership development. He has significant work experience supporting clients across geographies like Southeast Asia, India, Europe on different organization topics. And last but not the least, this session will be moderated by CheeTung Leong, co-founder and chief executive officer at EngageRocket Singapore. CheeTung is committed to bring the same level of analytics, sophistication, and scientific rigor to managing people as is currently applied to managing finance and customers. He is the CEO of EngageRocket, the fastest growing Asian employee experience software company that helps businesses improve talent retention and productivity. Before becoming an entrepreneur, he was regional director of Gallup in Southeast Asia. He read economics at the University of Cambridge and has an MA in political science from Columbia University under the Singapore Armed Forces Overseas Scholarship. Thank you so much for joining us, Jared, Chek Wee, Gaurav, and CheeTung. I'm sure our audience are looking forward to some incredible insights from you all. So without any further ado, let me invite CheeTung to take over and start this exciting discussion. Over to you, CheeTung.
Thanks very much for that introduction, Yasmin, and it's a great privilege to be here with very distinguished panelists. I'm looking forward to learning from all of you today. And the first question I'm very curious to ask all of you is, and this is very related to our experience with companies over the past 10 years, is how does people analytics actually increase rigor, reduce bias, and improve performance in organizations? What have you experienced in your line of work?
So I think I'll go first, right? So people analytics and we work with the clients significantly on how data can be used in people processes to kind of de-bias and actually serve as the harbinger of business impact into the HR processes, right? So what it allows you to do is it allows you to connect business data, people data, and come up with informed HR decisions, taking into account where the business is heading. And that's why it allows you to kind of work in the ambit that is set by the business to get that those priorities out, right? So it serves as a bridge, so to say, between business priorities, the people priorities, and allows both of them to function together, right? So that's in my view, is the primary genesis of any work that people analytics does, right? And for me, just one final point here, right? It is more of the analytics parts that's important. It is fundamentally the same as supply chain analytics or whatever different kind of analytics you have. It is just using people and business data together to come up with insights, right? So that's what we've seen work best with a lot of clients.
Great. Yeah, it's very much like a health checkup for an organization,
Yes.
which you can see what's going on with the organizational health. Jared, what have you experienced at General Motors in terms of using the application of people analytics in the day-to-day operations for HR?
Yeah, I really like what Ravi said there in terms of the business objectives to your people analytics. That's really what it's about. In terms of eliminating that bias, it's the people who have the bias, not the data. And sometimes that can lead you into one of your biggest pitfalls is people come into data with their own biases already there. Data is here to weed that out. Data is giving you the facts, the information, and then you develop your strategies to design and go for that outcome that you're looking for to, achieve that business outcome.
And maybe Chek Wee, in your very experienced, you've come across quite a number of different companies and worked within a number of different companies.
Yeah.
Were there some examples of people analytics that stood out to you that were applied well?
Yeah, how about let me give you an example of a young company. I mean, I spent 10 years in multinational companies, and the next 6 years I was with Zalora, Riot Games, and Orente, a fintech company. So in maybe one example that I think the situation in one of the startup companies that I was in, startup companies, we tend to hire very young managers, yeah, and many of these managers are first-time managers. And to make sure that our managers are equipped with managerial skill, how do we make sure that happens? On the other hand, you must imagine being a young company and a startup, our HR team, it's also limited in resources in terms of having that one-on-one coaching and support situation. So finally, even seasoned managers, they might not be, they may come from a different organization and may not be suitable when it comes down to managerial support to our younger workforce. So what I had implemented in one of this company is basically a very simple exercise called Rate My Manager during the performance appraisal. And this whole simple exercise help to reduce biasness, increase rigor, and in fact increase performances. Having said this, when you talk about Rate My Manager, performance appraisal is a time where it's not very pleasant for many people, right? So we do not want our employees to use that opportunity to get back at my manager during this period. So what we did is that we go down to the very basic. What is a minimal viable behavior that's required from a manager? So we ask the question, is my manager communicating clearly on my targets and his expectation or her expectation of me as an employee? Is my manager meeting me regularly to provide feedback and support? Is my manager conducting effective team meetings? These three behavioral questions form the basis for analytics to happen. So during performance appraisal, we ask this simple question. It's a very behavioral yes and no. Okay, and from there, not only HR is able to provide the adequate support to the right to the manager that needed help across the 7 countries, but also when it comes down to performance, when we have managers on the ground being more aware and being more equipped with ability to provide feedback, to set expectation, right, and conduct proper team meetings, right? performance have increased as a company. I hope this provide a bit of a example to what Gaurav and Jared talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, very practical, Chek Wee. I really like that. And it also illustrates a point that in the people space, sometimes like a little bit of data, some data, or even lower quality data than what would be perfect is better than no data. And I think you've brought it out quite nicely. And I'm going to drill into this a little bit more, especially because sometimes, as Gaurav said, right, the analytics and the kind of insights that it gives us are so important. But sometimes to get there, the baseline data collection either needs to start, or if it starts, what actually typically happens is that there's a lot of different data silos within an organization for people data. It's not like there's no data, there's lots of data around. Then how much of a priority do organizations actually put on pulling all these different data sources together such that they can tell a coherent story versus the sexy part, right? Like where I'm looking at the dashboards, I'm seeing all my insights, but you never get there. So there's this phrase that came across, plumbing before poetry, right? You want to get sure that the plumbing is right before you can do the poetry of analytics. Have you experienced any of that in your working lives? Jared, I see you smiling a lot. That must be a big part of your work.
Yeah, in terms of that, I always say the data is not the solution. We can't just rely on that. Sometimes we have some more pitfalls, like I was talking about. Sometimes there's too much data, and then we lose sight of the problem, things like that. Data is just supposed to really, align us together and make sure we're measuring kind of the right things. I never, especially when we're talking about people and human resources and problems, data is going to help us link those business objectives, but at the end of the day, we're still thinking about people. They have aspirations and dreams, and sometimes things change, priorities change. So yeah, I never really get too lost into it. And sometimes, like I was saying, when we're talking about setting expectations, sometimes there is a call out: is that data accurate? Is it big enough? So you have to kind of measure yourself in terms of like why we're looking at a certain data set rather than everything, and how that goes back to your original problem. So I use more data for effective problem solving, identifying the problem, and developing a solution to that problem.
That's great. It's a very hypothesis-driven kind of approach, which is actually very McKinsey and driven. I'm actually curious, like Gaurav, in your work with your clients, do you encounter this issue where either there isn't a clear hypothesis in place, or there's a clear hypothesis, but the structure of the data is in so much difficulty that you need to spend a lot of time cleaning that and integrating that first?
So that's a very interesting question, right? So let me give you a few data points on what we have seen in our work across clients, right? In no situation, and I am like emphasizing the no situation part here, right? Has the data not been good enough, right? Because what we don't think you're going to have is 100% reliable, 100% synced up, 100% like you said, right? The data that is a gift from God, that just doesn't exist. Right? So, but whatever exists is workable, provided you have a hypothesis on what the problem is and what you're trying to solve using that data, right? So the data is just a bunch of points, numbers, what you have, right? But what we have seen work best is that if business is kind of interested in the problem you're solving, a lot of times the failure mode is not the data. The failure mode is that HR is kind of doing stuff at the side and not really speaking to the business about the problem. It's very exciting, right? So people tend to go a little overboard on what we can do with the data, right? So the process of people analytics for some organizations is, oh, this is the data we have. Let's analyze this to see what we can figure out. What we've seen work best is, this is the business problem we have. Let's figure out what data is needed, whether it needs to be connected or can it be analyzed in silos, and come up with insights that can actually improve business performance. So if it is problem backwards, your analytics is going to be effective. If it is just looking at data and seeing what analysis you can do, more often than not, even after a very good analysis, you will miss the mark, right? Business will not be interested. solutions will not get implemented, and so on and so forth. So what we believe and we have seen being most effective is don't worry too much about the data. Worry about figuring out what is the problem that you're trying to solve, and then see what data is required. More often than not, you will find that you already have it in place.
That's a really good nugget of insight. I'm writing that down. Like, focus on the business problem first, and that would guide the kind of data that you go searching for or analyzing after that.
Yeah.
Great. Chek Wee, you just shared a very good example earlier. About creating data from nothing, right? So how have you experienced this in your course of work?
I just want to comment on the, just now what Gaurav and Jared mentioned is so true. We should be problem solving rather than going for the sexiness or the wonderful dashboard, right? I think I just want to remind is that, hey, data is one thing, but at the end of the day, it must be due to action, and due to action and problem solving, how are we going to get to that? In fact, when you talk about sexiness of a dashboard, after a while, in my experience as a HR business partner for big companies and small companies, is that business leaders after a while will not get excited anymore, no matter how colorful your chart is. So having a problem solution approach is much more effective. It is more practical, and it comes to an end, a constructive end. And having said this, just another comment down here is that every time we think of data and dashboard, we think of it, like a big CIA office with all this wonderful chart. In fact, in my experience, the most effective way to convince a person of your data into action is on pieces of paper. I will print out that data, that insight on pieces of paper, because it's very distracting. It's distracting to put it on, you're having a conversation eye to eye with a business leader. And then after that, take a look at this. It's like, I'm trying to impress you. I'm trying to tell you a story. Look at me. I'm talking to you. I'm telling you, we have a situation. How are we going to deal with it? The data back it up. Not, please do not put data as the forefront. The problem solver is the person effecting this decision. And what beyond data is really a decision with a lot of consideration that the business leader needs to make, right? So my point down here is exactly to what Gaurav mentioned, and Jared, do not use data for its sexiness. Use it as a problem-solving tool. Okay.
I really love kind of what you said about making that connection as well. Because when we're looking at that, even that problem-solving solution, you don't ever, sometimes that data doesn't solve all the problems in all the world.
Exactly.
It might solve one problem here. That doesn't mean it necessarily solves
another.
Yeah.
That's a good point. And actually, it reminds me of an article that I read from Professor Adam Grant from UPenn about sometimes we hope for this counterintuitive, massive insight that comes from the data. But actually, a lot of times the data confirms a lot of the gut feel and hypotheses we have, and that's still valuable. It's not, we shouldn't dismiss that kind of data when it does come that way. And since all of you mentioned business problems and tying it to relevance, I think this conversation would be remiss if we didn't talk about the upheaval that's going on in the workplace across the world right now because of the pandemic. I'll love to find out from all of you, how have you seen people analytics used by your company, by other companies, by your clients, to be able to address the way that they think about the pandemic and the response, but particularly investing for the future so that they can thrive beyond whatever it is that the world is currently going through?
So I think this is a very interesting question, right? I think one of the premier applications of people analytics in getting the workforce ready for the future is what we've seen on the skills side, right? Now you have a tremendous library of data, right? It's both in the public domain through LinkedIn and your other sources of data. It's privately held by companies through what qualifications and what skills do employees possess, and so on and so forth, right? So bringing all of that together, and linked to the business problem that, pandemic has accelerated the change in the workforce and the skills that are going to be necessary going forward. The transition was already there, but just like 10 years of change compressed into 1.5 years, right? So now people analytics and then data-driven insights are really kind of turbocharging the organization's ability to look at skill transitions, to understand, how do you upskill, reskill folks, what are the key pathways that certain jobs can take, and so on and so forth, right? And we believe that this particular application of people analytics is going to be a game changer in the coming years as organizations fundamentally transform the 3 Ws, right? Work, workforce, and workplace. So as that transition takes place, this application of people analytics will be front and center in helping organizations navigate that.
That's a really good perspective. Jared, what have you seen in GM? Have you guys been dealing with this using analytics at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the pandemic has brought a huge amount of different kind of problems. We've seen, supply shortages, labor shortages, talent shortages. So I think people analytics has a real opportunity here to help not just HR, but the business kind of drive effectiveness and cost efficiencies within the business that we have. We want to reduce obsolete turnover. So people analytics is a tool to kind of look at that problem. We want to provide any ROIs that we can on the business, especially when things get tighter and like I said, supply might be short. We know that we're in a talent war right now. So these are all the things that we can use people analytics to help drive and make better strategies to solve all these problems. Again, it comes back to problem solving, but the pandemic has definitely shown us how fast we can work. We kind of here at GM we kind of put forth this fail forward fast, and I think the people analytics side that gives us metrics to kind of judge how far we're coming forward.
Interesting. Chek Wee?
Yeah, I think CheeTung, I'd like to follow up on, Jared was talking about talent war. Maybe, in this pandemic, of course, we have situation that we need to problem solve. But let me give you a more positive example on how analytics or data can be used. So essentially in Singapore, our government has been very proactive in intervening, making sure that we tide over this pandemic. And one of the concerns of the government is to make sure that our young graduates are able to secure good positions in companies. So as a result, for the benefits of people outside this country, outside of Singapore, government has come up with this initiative called SG United Traineeship. So what is interesting is that the government has invested making sure that providing a lot of subsidy for hiring, putting young graduates on traineeship programs. And so with this initiative, the company I'm serving right now, Straits Trading, we wanted, yes, pandemic is a situation, but it's also a situation for us to start to groom, start to build a talent pipeline. So we decided to embark on this SG United traineeship. And from there, we managed to secure 9 trainees to be hired on the 9 months training program. And they are experiencing 3 different functions. And from there, they go on the 9 years rotation program with the company upon graduation from this traineeship program. So it's a very good initiative and supported by our government. And what is interesting is that interestingly, because of the popularity of this initiative, it's a talent war to what Jared was mentioning in Singapore, where everyone is trying hard to get hold of this young graduates. So it's a happy problem that we have. Nevertheless, it is a problem that we have. And so as a result, for companies like us, how are we going to compete with thousands of companies in Singapore to get this young graduate to join us? And more importantly, to get the good quality ones to join us, right? So essentially, we have tons of applications. We have people who comes in, hundreds of people, and we basically use online assessment tools to look for cognitive ability. I think the problem solving, more than just having this tool to help us to sieve out, who are the top 20%. But what is also interesting, that our talent pool actually increase, because traditionally companies tend to look at pedigree, backgrounds, which university you're from, which, how well did you do in your university, what major do you do, and what internship experience have you gained, right? We went for the traditional source. Then if everyone is looking at the same problem with the same view, it becomes shrunk to a very limited group of people who are always having opportunities out there. And because of the online assessment tool that we have, it created a cut off the biasness and allow us to explore a bigger pipeline of people. At the end, the results of this initiative, using very simple online assessment tool, we were not only able to reduce the time to talk to these people, but you also reduce the biases and increase the pipeline of people that we can, the higher probability of getting higher quality candidate, not just by their pedigree in terms of educational background, but really what they can bring to the table. I hope this is another example.
That's a really good example. Thanks for sharing that, Chek Wee. Something that we've seen with a lot of the organizations that we're working with is because of this talent war that Jared mentioned, it is vital that they are analyzing, using the data that they have, why it is that people are leaving the company. We're living right now in the Great Resignation, and ironically, but this has been really insightful that some people leave because of proximity to the office in the past, but now because they're all working remotely, that's no longer the key drivers, and some of the key drivers are actually mental well-being or mental health at work, which is quite unusual and interesting in this time. And then on the flip side of it, using analytics has also helped some of these organizations understand why is it that people are joining them, the new hires. What is it that was the critical points of their employee value proposition that allowed these top candidates to join them? Is this something that you've experienced as well in your organizations, with your clients?
I think looking at the entire HR life cycle, right? The hire to retire and the different stages. What you've seen is, pandemic or no pandemic, analytics was actually being used to drive a lot of insights across. This has accelerated the need as well also as the acceptance of data-driven insights coming in, right? Because like you pointed out, the fundamental factors like people are attracted to companies have changed, and they've changed dramatically in the short run, right? So use of data is kind of allowing executives to understand from almost the ground up, how do you build a new EVP to get the right talent in, right? Because mental health was almost never the reason why people joined something. Now it's become one of the most important reasons why people are quitting and joining, right? The Great Resignation. One of the reasons for that wave coming in is, well, if you don't support my mental health, you are not a good employer. And I would rather go to somebody who supports, because proximity to office, the office perks, whether I could eat a pizza in my office or, those don't matter anymore, right? And people have realized that, and companies are using kind of analytical insights to come up with, the alternates to make their EVP stronger. Similarly, as you move down the chain of what you do with people, performance management has significantly shifted to also ensuring that managerial capability is built. That was one of the features that seems to have become more and more important. Resignations are now being looked at very differently, right? So earlier the analysis, and I wouldn't say much of analysis, but it was, he's leaving or she's leaving for pay or a better role, right? But now that has dramatically shifted to people are just leaving because, the prospects of growth eventually in the other company might be higher, right? So I think the infusion of analytics is something that we've seen clients try across the employee life cycle, and with very, very good results. I also think that there has been a cultural shift in HR and also business executives to accept data over intuition, which is long time coming, but now you've seen this happen in a quite accelerated manner. That executives are also willing to say that, oh, I thought so, but okay, if you can prove it otherwise, then maybe I was thinking, something that was incorrect. And that's a big shift. And we've seen more and more that happen as a result of the leveraging of data and counterintuitive insights that data seems to be producing.
Maybe let me jump in down here briefly. Gaurav talked about wellness, and I think the audience for this session, right, may come from big companies and may come from smaller size companies like mine right now, right? And I just want to give an example is that data doesn't have to be generated from within your company. And let me give a case in point. Gaurav talked about mental wellness. The truth is that there's a lot of data and case studies and white paper, and basically a lot of advocacy for intervention on mental wellness of our people during this pandemic. Can you imagine? We've been wearing our masks for the past 2 years, right? And it becomes such a norm. It's like you feel naked not wearing it. So in this, what I'm trying to say down here is because of the literature and the data set that's available outside in bigger companies, by maybe in General Motors and other companies, you can use this external data to bring it back to convince your leadership team, your management, that we need to do something for our people. It doesn't have to be, it must be within the company. So what we did as a company is we actually engage a vendor that provides this triage services. So basically, it's a telemedicine app whereby you will be able to reach out to speak to a GP. Not only it will help to reduce the contact time going to the clinic, but it also give this opportunity for the GP, for the general practitioner to do a triage. Hey, I'm having a splitting headache this past few nights. I couldn't sleep and things like that. That may lead to a session whereby, hey, you know what? The doctors are actually trained to be able to provide some psychological wellness help intervention. So that's what happened. And what I did is I did not use data from within the company, because the company that I serve in, we don't have thousands of people like General Motors, okay? So what we did is we use data sets and trends that is from the outside, okay? Convincing your management outside in.
So I just wanted to add a little bit here, right? I think for us, what we have seen is that people analytics is finally maturing into an ecosystem play. Just to what you said, right? I think for once now we are expanding the frontiers of what we call data to look at data outside the organization and other input factors to how do you build the data set, right? So a good example is what you gave. The other example that comes to mind is a client of mine is actually working with a MedTech device to kind of understand which managers cause the blood pressure in individuals to go up, right? And how can we make those interactions a little more smoother, right? So I think the ecosystem of what people analytics data comprises of is also diversifying, and companies are actually moving outside the traditional data sets to include much more in terms of increasing the robustness of the data, keeping in mind the business problem to solve, right? Always keeping in mind the business problem to solve.
Yeah, earlier we talked about one problem solution lead to another problem.
Yeah.
I'm thinking privacy, man. You gotta put a heart, something to measure my body. But it's interesting. Thanks for sharing, Rob.
Yeah, it's yeah. Please go ahead, Jared.
I was just gonna say, I love this conversation. So many great points are being made here. With this the Great Resignation and things like that. Not all problems are the same problems everywhere. Additionally, it has awoken us a lot, saying that we really have to focus on this and give it an effort and develop some new strategies. But it doesn't also come from internal data only. It comes as well as from external data. Sometimes it's from a vendor. Sometimes it's from doing your own market research. And a lot of it has been on a competitor scale. Since we're competing so fiercely with each other, big companies, small companies, we want to see what the other hand is doing. You're doing this over here. Oh, we see that's working for you. We're going to try to implement that or something similar to take that talent back. So,
Yeah, it's a real talent war out there, and I can't believe it. I think we might just have time for just one last question. I'm shocked at how fast the time has gone. But this one's maybe a little bit more exploratory, right? And especially as many of the companies that we've spoken to that are listening in right now, they're seeing this thing, people analytics. They probably started with a little bit of reporting, descriptive, a little bit of diagnostic analytics that's going on. But many that we've spoken to, and I think in the audience is also going to be wondering, so how do I take the next step? How do I start? Or if I've started, how do I really supercharge this process in my organization? Would you have any perspectives on helping these HR professionals out?
I mean, coming from a perspective of how we've seen people analytics evolve in different organizations, right? I think most companies are now beyond the initial pilots. They have seen and they have proven the efficacy of the analytical method when applied to people data. So that for us is stage one, right? If you aren't there, then the easy way to go there is pick up the biggest business problem and run a small pilot, prove the efficacy, and then you get the business buy-in, right? I think the next stage is more around how do you embed a data-driven culture across HR? Because what we've seen is that, while business leaders are used to making database decisions, you have fundamentally analytics now being embedded across. I think sometimes the roadblock is the HR professionals' mindset that, I have been in this field and there is intuition to go with data. I think that's one of the failure modes that we've seen companies then tackle, that people analytics, instead of being a specialist function, is something that everybody does, right? So data becomes how HR operates, how HR works. And then finally, it is kind of embedded in most people decisions that are going forward, right? So it's a curve of pilot, culture, and then go on to kind of embedding in almost all people decisions as a way to support decision making. So we are not advocating that machines decide, right? The Terminator is still a little far away, but what we are saying is that data helps in debiasing, and it should provide the decision maker a support while they're looking at decision making across the talent processes. And that's next evolution of what people analytics can bring to the table.
Great points.
Or Jared, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so if you're out there and you're thinking like, how do I do this? How do I start? I don't think you need to be a data professional in terms of like large scale, big data sets, anything like that. Really, first, what you should probably start with is framework in terms of what problems are we facing and how can this help? Additionally, from there, I mean, when you are start looking at the actual data, data availability, you have to decide, where you're getting your data from, internally, externally, through a vendor, how much data is useful, the accuracy of that data. I love Gaurav's point about, the culture insights. You got to get leadership support that they're going to back you up in this and trying to take on these new initiatives. Whenever you try to implement change in an organization, even when you have data to show you and back you up, it's sometimes difficult. So, starting that is probably the biggest way to just start up and do it. Don't hesitate, but build yourself your own framework of how you're going to do this and then implement it.
Love it. Chek Wee?
Yeah. I just, okay, how do we, so for our audience who wants to embark on this journey, right? How do we reach stage one to what Gaurav talked about? I'm a very practical, simple guy. And let me share with you how I did it, okay? I think across our HR domain, from recruiting to performance management to engagement to total rewards and so on and so forth, I think the easiest starting point comes from recruiting. And because recruiting, if you recruit internally, you save money. You recruit externally, you get an agency, you pay a certain percentage. And that's immediate cost saving to the bottom line. Yeah. So recruiting, how are we going to create a situation? And let me just share with you a very quick example of how I did it in the past. So essentially, I rely on a massive whiteboard. I have 7 markets that I provide support as a regional HR person. I will go down to each market and request that each of my team has a massive whiteboard. And on this massive whiteboard, it will have visibility to the kind of recruiting that we are doing. It served a few purposes. Number one, it created visibility to, what are the position, not only internally, I can also see what, how good, where are the situation that's falling behind. So my recruiters are all telling me, how much they're feeling, what are the leads, how many candidates are presented. But okay, the whiteboard is one area. Another area is I go in stages. So the very first stage, I post on job portals, on LinkedIn, on job streets and whatnot. So posting these jobs, I need to create a situation to be able to know when is it time to activate stage 2, phase 2, where we have agencies to help us. So creating this format, all my recruiters across 7 markets will create a rigor whereby they would put it on a spreadsheet. It's not some fancy recruitment ATS, okay? Stage 1, we are talking about no investment. Google Sheet is what you have, an Excel spreadsheet, right? So I have basically recruitment team basically have the same format the format is driven centrally from regional, and everyone follows the same cadence and showing us what they have done. They posted the job, how many have applied, how are we, and should we be moving to stage 2? And when it comes to stage 2, my recruitment agencies, our partners were giving exclusivity to deliver. They have 2 weeks timeline. And whatever they present, okay, I have a conversion rate matrix. If you present someone and it's not accepted, it's a ding on you. So we look at conversion rate, how many candidates, the denominator is you presented how many candidates and how many candidates accepted by the hiring manager to go for that stage. That created another matrix, right? And from there, across the region, I'm able to measure who are delivering well. And so from a vendor standpoint, they have exclusivity. If their numbers are doing well, they get another 2 weeks of exclusivity. If not, we will move on to the second recruitment agency in our vendor listing. So it's a discipline that we do across from a recruiting standpoint. And my advice for those who want to reach stage 1, do something that's obvious, do something that has an immediate impact to your bottom line or to your top line. If you manage to hire someone great from the market, who's going to be your movers and shakers of your organization, that's another great data point qualitatively, quantitatively, that you can measure is that, boss, where's my salary increase? Okay.
Thanks very much, everyone. And it's been such an exciting panel. I really hate that we've got to stop now, but we covered 3 main points today. The first around the pandemic and the future of work and how that's playing out with people analytics, and super exciting. Number 2 was around the talent war and the great resignation and where people analytics can take shape within that as well. And the third one, which we just discussed, was really how do we get started? How do we embed this culture of data-driven insight within HR? How do we get started small with free tools and then slowly grow that as well? Back to you, Yasmin. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. A big thank you to all our panelists for such an engaging discussion. And thank you, CheeTung, for moderating the discussion so well and summarizing it so well as well. Understanding data using people analytics is indeed going to be the bedrock to get insights into your workforce for effective problem solving and for reimagining processes accordingly. So thank you for sharing those insights, everyone. That concludes this session. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Coming up next is our closing keynote for the conference by Rosalind Chow Koo, founder and CEO at CXA Group Singapore. I'm sure you would not want to miss this, so see you there.